Hi, I'm Laureen. At my sister's engagement party, they seated me in the hallway, right next to the restrooms. No explanation, no mistake, just silence, like I didn't matter. Then came the photos without me, the speech I wasn't allowed to give, the jokes at my expense, all while smiling guests clinked champagne glasses like nothing was wrong. But what they didn't expect was that I'd stop staying quiet. What happened next? It didn't just shake the room, it tore the mask off an entire family lie. I pulled into the resort's lower lot, the one they usually kept for staff or overflow guests. My GPS had chirped, "You've arrived," but I didn't feel like I'd arrived anywhere that welcomed me. The sky over Santa Barbara was clear, that kind of sharp California blue that made every shadow starker. There were no parking attendants in sight, just white tents fluttering in the distance and a long gravel walk ahead. I checked my lipstick in the mirror, reapplied a dab of concealer to my tired eyes, then slipped on my heels. The navy dress I'd carefully chosen felt suddenly too understated, too deliberate. At the front gate, a young woman in a headset glanced up. "Hi, welcome. Are you with the bridal party or guest side?" "Laureen Carter, I'm Trista's sister," I said, offering a smile that didn't quite stick. Her fingers paused on her tablet. I saw it, the flicker of hesitation, then the quick professional smile reassembled. "Oh yes, you're seated at table H." "Where is that?" "Right through the hallway, just past the coat room." My lips parted, but the protest died there. I followed her finger toward the side wing. Behind me, a pair of older guests were ushered inside the grand ballroom, laughter trailing behind them. I peeked at the seating chart. Trista's friends, her fiancé's colleagues, extended cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, all lit under chandeliers and cascading orchids. My name was nowhere on that board. I clutched my invite card, the one with calligraphy so pristine it felt ironic now. "Laureen Carter, honored guest," it had said. Honored, right next to the mop closet. As I stepped toward my designated table, the hallway grew colder, not physically, just emotionally sterile. Someone had placed an air freshener near the restroom door. That told me everything. I set my purse down at table H, which had 3 chairs and no centerpiece. It felt less like a reception and more like a punishment. 2 days earlier, I'd received an email from Trista's assistant because she couldn't bother to send it herself. "Please avoid wearing red, white, black, or bright yellow. The bride would prefer soft neutrals or navy tones. We trust you understand." I understood, loud and clear. The message wasn't about elegance. It was about not standing out, about making sure I faded quietly into her backdrop. So I wore navy, not because I was trying to make peace, but because I wanted to prove I could play by her rules, even when they were rigged. I watched the guests filing past. No one looked my way. A waiter came by and offered me water, not champagne, not wine, just water. Like I was there to monitor coat check, not celebrate my sister's engagement. I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. Everything about me blended. Dark hair tied back, understated heels, even my smile. It didn't make a ripple. Maybe that was the point. Somewhere, a bell chimed. Probably a signal for the cocktail hour. I didn't move. For years I'd swallowed the jabs, the silence, the constant reminder that I was the quiet sister, the one who didn't demand attention, the one who didn't need a spotlight because she brought her own books to family events. But this was new, banished to the hallway like a last-minute RSVP. I pressed my hands flat on my thighs, steadying myself. I didn't want to cause a scene. I wasn't here to ruin anything. I came because, despite everything, part of me still thought, maybe things could change. Maybe someone would turn to me and say, "I'm glad you're here." Instead, I sat by the door, invisible, silent, and as voices from the main hall grew louder, champagne corks, laughter, applause, I realized something I hadn't let myself say out loud until now. I hadn't come to start drama. I came to be part of something. But sitting next to the utility closet, I finally understood. Maybe I was never meant to belong. I stayed in that chair longer than I cared to admit, watching the hall fill with people who didn't seem to notice I was missing from the room, or from anything, really. Laughter spilled down the corridor in bursts. Glasses clinked. Someone in stilettos walked past me and didn't even glance down. After what felt like an hour, but was probably closer to 30 minutes, I stood up. I needed to move. Sitting there made me feel like I was sinking into the carpet. I wandered slowly, staying along the outer edges of the reception area. I didn't want to draw attention. Or worse, pity. I kept my face neutral, the kind of polite blankness I'd mastered during years of family gatherings. To the right of the bar was a tall display labeled, "Our Family Through the Years." White letters in looping cursive sat atop a 3-panel board, decorated with fake eucalyptus leaves and tiny fairy lights. A sign beneath it read, "Photos curated by the bride herself." That made me hesitate. Still, I walked over, telling myself not to expect anything. But I did. Of course I did. Each photo was printed on glossy cardstock and framed with gold tape. Trista at 4 years old with cake smeared across her cheeks. Trista at her high school prom. Trista at college graduation. Arms thrown around friends. Family vacations. Birthday parties. Christmas mornings. Some images I remembered vividly, because I was there, but I wasn't in any of them. Not once. Not a blurred shoulder. Not a side profile. Not even the back of my head. I stared longer than I should have, hoping maybe I'd missed one. Maybe a small group photo tucked near the corner, one where I hadn't been cropped out, but no, my name wasn't there. My face wasn't there. It was like I'd never existed in her story. I didn't hear Marjorie approach until she spoke behind me. "She worked hard on that board," she said, like it excused the erasure. I turned to her. "You didn't notice I wasn't in a single photo?" She took a sip of her mimosa, her expression unreadable. "You never liked being photographed, Laureen. You always said so." I blinked. That was in middle school. And even then it wasn't true. I just didn't like the way Trista pushed in front of me. Marjorie waved a hand lightly. "You always kept to yourself. I thought you liked it that way." That was the moment it clicked. It wasn't just that they forgot me. They had rewritten me. She turned to go, her heels clicking gently on the hardwood floor. "Don't dwell on this. It's her day." I looked back at the board. There was a photo from our family trip to Big Sur. Trista standing in front of the cliffs with our parents. I'd taken that photo. I remembered the breeze, the salt in the air, the way my dad couldn't figure out how to unlock the camera app. I was standing 5 feet from them. I wasn't behind the camera. I was beside them. And still, she'd edited me out. I walked slowly toward the guestbook table, needing a second to breathe. That's when I saw the decorative family tree. A thick wooden cutout where names were etched on gold leaves, glued in a sprawling pattern. Marjorie and Randall. Trista. Trista's fiancé. A few cousins. Even a second cousin named Austin I hadn't seen in 10 years. No Laureen. I leaned in, searching. Maybe my name was tucked beneath a leaf. Maybe I'd slipped into the glue wrong. But no, there was nothing. The staff had handed me a place card, yes. A seat in the hallway next to the restrooms. But here, on this carefully curated version of our family, I was invisible. No name, no photo, no place. Just a living ghost with a navy dress and a polite smile. Someone behind me whispered, "Oh, that's such a sweet idea," pointing to the tree. I stepped aside, letting them take it in. I didn't want to explain who I was. I didn't want to explain anything. I had never been one for confrontation. But erasure is something else entirely. It tells you not that you're disliked, but that you were never meant to be part of the picture to begin with. And suddenly, it wasn't about seating anymore. It wasn't about color palettes or champagne. They hadn't just given me a bad seat. They'd made it official. I wasn't in the family. Not in pictures, not on paper, not even in the story. I left the display quietly, blending into the swell of people moving toward the ballroom entrance. My dress brushed the wall as I passed, and I focused on breathing, slow, steady, like I could anchor myself to the rhythm. The main hall had shifted from soft sunlight to twilight glamour. The chandeliers overhead now shimmered gold. Waiters moved swiftly between guests offering champagne, crab cakes, and skewers that looked too delicate to eat. The string quartet played something upbeat now, almost joyful. It didn't match how I felt. I kept near the wall, nodding when people brushed past me. A few said hello in passing. more out of politeness than recognition. I was background. Then came the call. "Let's get everyone in for the big family photo." The photographer's voice boomed from near the center of the room, cheerful and commanding. A ripple of excitement moved through the crowd. I didn't plan to join. I figured no one expected me to. But someone, an aunt maybe, tugged lightly at my elbow. "Come on, sweetheart, you should be in this one." I followed, unsure why I did. We were arranged in clusters, people shuffled around like puzzle pieces. The photographer adjusted angles, scooted people closer together. My mother was already in the front row beside Trista, holding her champagne like a prop. I hovered at the edge, waiting to see where I should go. Trista's voice rang out. "Hope Laureen doesn't mind standing way in the back. She always preferred watching from the shadows anyway." A laugh scattered through the group, light, social, almost hesitant, but it landed. I didn't flinch. I smiled. That smile. The one I'd perfected at age 13 when she made fun of my braces in front of her friends. The flash went off. Everyone blinked. The photo was captured. A moment frozen in time. Another one where I was in the room but not really there. As people dispersed, a few guests offered me smiles, soft ones that tried to apologize without words. But no one said anything. Of course they didn't. I turned to head toward the open bar, just to grab something fizzy to hold, but was intercepted by a cousin I barely knew. "You're Laureen, right?" she asked. "You look different than I expected. Trista said you were kind of, I don't know, more artsy?" I forced a nod. "I write." "Oh, right, she mentioned that. Said you're kind of the mysterious one, lives with a cat and a lot of books." Before I could respond, Trista appeared beside her, smiling too brightly. "She's our very own little enigma," she said sweetly. "Single, introverted, very independent, like a Jane Austen character if Jane had an Instagram." More laughter. Even the cousin smiled, not cruelly, just in that awkward social way people do when they're unsure whether it's okay to laugh or not. But they always do. I didn't laugh. I just held my glass a little tighter. I didn't say anything, not because I lacked a comeback, but because I knew it wouldn't matter. You can't argue with a mask, and Trista wore hers flawlessly. To anyone else, she was warm, witty, welcoming. But to me, she was a lighthouse made of mirrors, designed to reflect light and never absorb it. I excused myself and slipped through the side corridor, past a row of manicured floral arrangements and into the nearest restroom, the kind with soft lighting and individually rolled towels. I stood at the sink and stared into the mirror. Hair neat, makeup subtle, dress appropriate, expression gone. I didn't look sad. I didn't look angry. I looked like I wasn't even in the room. The door creaked. Someone entered. I didn't turn. Let them think I needed time to touch up my makeup. In reality, I just needed to exist somewhere that didn't try to reduce me to a prop for someone else's spotlight. I dabbed my lips with tissue, flushed it down the toilet just to make noise, then looked at myself again. "They don't need me here," I whispered. "They need someone to compare her to." A shadow, a contrast. And the thing about shadows is, they move when the light does. The funny thing about being the family shadow, eventually, shadows move too. By the time I left the restroom, the light outside the tall ballroom windows had dipped into that warm golden hour glow, casting soft amber across the white table linens and sequined dresses. The room was fuller now, buzzing with that strange cocktail of excitement and polished pretense. I slipped back to the edge of the crowd, letting the ambient music and idle chatter act as cover. Somewhere near the head table, I spotted my dad laughing, gently, awkwardly, at something a man in a bow tie said. My mother was already seated beside Trista, her posture straight, one ankle crossed elegantly over the other, like she belonged in a magazine. Then came the DJ's voice, smooth, rehearsed. "All right, everyone, it's time to hear from someone very special to our bride." I froze mid-step. For a flicker of a second, something lifted in me, hope maybe, or just confusion. I adjusted the side of my dress and stood taller, not walking forward but bracing, like a door might finally crack open. "Let's welcome Cousin Lance!" Applause scattered across the room like polite popcorn. A few guests clapped a beat too long. Lance, who to my knowledge hadn't spoken to Trista since 2019, shuffled up to the mic, visibly sweating under the lights. I stayed exactly where I was, still. He cleared his throat and started with a joke about meeting Trista at a family reunion. One that had to be a lie, because Trista skipped that reunion entirely. The crowd chuckled anyway. I stood there thinking, anyone. They would have handed the mic to anyone, just not to me. Not the sister who lived in the same city. Not the one who helped Mom through her hip surgery. Not the one who once drove 4 hours in a rainstorm to bring Trista an overnight bag when her flight got canceled. But Lance? Sure, let him speak. The speech ended. Another round of applause. People returned to their seats. I didn't. I made my way to the champagne station, picked up a glass just for the motion of it, then headed toward where Marjorie sat, dabbing the corners of her eyes like something about that moment had moved her. I stood beside her quietly, waiting until she looked up. She didn't. So I spoke. Did you know they were going to have Lance speak? She blinked, looked at me like I'd interrupted a sacred meditation. Well, yes, she said gently. Trista thought it might be more upbeat that way. You're more introspective, honey. This kind of thing, crowds, speeches, it's never really been your strong suit, right? I stared at her, my voice caught somewhere between my chest and my throat. You didn't even ask me. She sipped her champagne. Sweetheart, I didn't think you'd want the pressure. There it was again, the reframing. My silence wasn't their choice, it was my nature. I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because there was nothing else to say to someone who's rewritten the story so thoroughly that she thinks it's true. I drifted away, weaving past a table of groomsmen trying too hard to impress each other, past 2 teenage girls snapping selfies against the flower wall. The evening air had cooled now, enough that stepping outside didn't feel like escape. It felt like clarity. Out on the balcony, the sky had faded into pale lavender. The ocean beyond the bluff shimmered in the dying light. I pulled my phone from my clutch and opened my notes app. I started typing without fully knowing where the thought would land. If they're this afraid of what I might say, maybe it's time I said it. I stared at the line, reading it twice, then 3 more times. My fingers hovered over the screen. I didn't send it anywhere. I just saved it. Behind me, the music swelled again. A slow song this time. One of those generic ballads meant to cue emotion without specifics. I leaned on the balcony rail and let the salt air sting my eyes just a little. Not from tears, though it would have been understandable. No, this wasn't sadness anymore. It was the moment after. They'd done everything they could to mute me, but silence doesn't mean surrender. The lights above the terrace glowed like tiny paper moons, strung between wooden beams softened by ivy. I sat alone on one of the benches, the distant murmur of laughter and jazz drifting from the main hall like it belonged to a different world. I hadn't meant to hide. I just needed somewhere my name wasn't a joke and my silence wasn't assigned. The sea air had shifted cooler. I hugged my arms, letting the moment stretch a little longer than it needed to. Out of habit more than purpose, I pulled out my phone and opened my messages. Most were old group threads, notifications I hadn't bothered to clear. Scrolling through them felt like flipping through a yearbook of moments no one remembered I was part of. That's when I saw it. A voice note from Trista, dated 6 months ago. I hadn't opened it when it came. It must have arrived during one of those weekends when I'd convinced myself distance was healthier than engagement. I pressed play. Her voice crackled through the phone, light and casual, like she didn't know she was being recorded. I'm not marrying Darian because I'm in love with him, obviously. I just know how to manage him. He's so easy. Honestly, I could train him blindfolded. There was laughter, not hers, someone else's, maybe a friend. Then a click as the message cut off. I didn't react at first, just stared at the phone like it had betrayed me too. I remembered brushing it off the first time, assuming it had been sent by mistake, meant for someone else. Or maybe I just didn't want to hold one more truth that proved what I'd always suspected. Trista wasn't just cruel to me, she was calculating with everyone. It wasn't just me she pretended around. Footsteps behind me made me turn. Darian. He was alone, phone in hand, clearly stepping out to take a breath. His face was unreadable, not the smooth, polished charm he usually wore, but something quieter. He noticed me, paused, and gave a small smile. Didn't expect to see anyone else out here, he said, sliding his phone into his pocket. You hiding too? I managed a half smile. Something like that. He leaned against the railing, looking out over the darkened lawn. She's different tonight. I didn't answer. Darian exhaled. You think she's changed? I turned to him. You really want to know what I think? His silence was answer enough. I tapped the screen, scrolled to the message, and pressed play. No commentary, no explanation, just Trista's voice, raw and real and cruel. He didn't interrupt. His expression didn't shift much, except for a tiny twitch at the corner of his jaw. When it ended, he looked at me. She said that about me? She didn't know I heard it, I said calmly. Until now, no one had. He let out a dry laugh, one with no humor at all. And she sent that to you? By accident, I said, and I let it slide, because I didn't want to be involved. But you asked. He was quiet for a long time. The kind of quiet people only manage when they're weighing more than just feelings. They're weighing futures. Finally, he said, You know, I always wondered if I was just another accessory in her story. I thought maybe that was just my own insecurity. I didn't speak. I knew too well what it was like to question your own instincts until someone else confirmed them. She's charming, he said. Smart, strategic. But I never thought manipulative. I looked at him. You deserve to know who you're marrying. He nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the shadows stretching across the yard. Then he said almost to himself, I need to talk to my mom. It wasn't dramatic. There was no explosion. Just a man adjusting the lens he'd been using to look at his life. He didn't thank me. He didn't owe me that. But he heard me. And for the first time that day, that was enough. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't fought. But I'd been heard. By the time we left the terrace, the air had shifted. Cooler, heavier. The kind of weight that didn't come from weather, but from knowing something irreversible was about to unfold. We didn't talk much on the way to the conference room. Darian was quiet, focused, like someone mentally sorting a drawer they'd avoided for too long. I followed a step behind, no longer trying to blend in or disappear. That part of me had been peeled away. The conference room was tucked behind a hallway near the catering entrance. It wasn't glamorous, no chandeliers or rose walls, just a neutral space meant for logistics and last-minute vendor meetings. But in that moment, it felt like neutral ground, a place where truth didn't need a spotlight to exist. Darian opened the door, let me in first. The room was dim, lit only by overhead cans and the glow from a wall sconce in the corner. A long table sat at the center, perfectly staged with notepads and branded pens. Corporate civility at its finest. She's texting her stylist again, Darian said, voice low. Same person from the last few fittings. She's panicking now. I saw her screen when she left it open for a second. I nodded, just once. She knows something shifted. She knows I did. Before I could reply, the door opened again. Althea stepped in like she'd been summoned to a boardroom she'd once owned. Her gown was sleek, navy with a slight shimmer. Her hair pulled back in a twist so tight it didn't move when she did. In her left hand was a navy envelope, thick, crisp, decisive. She sat at the end of the table, not waiting for us to rise. We're skipping the niceties, she said. Let's get to it. Darian didn't sit. He hovered near her, still holding onto the edge of composure. I stayed to the side, more witness than participant, but not invisible. Not this time. Althea slid the envelope open and laid out 2 printed pages on the table. This came in by accident, she explained, her voice precise. My assistant rescheduled a styling appointment last week. Trista's stylist sent me their full backup by mistake. Apparently, they upload all client communications to a shared cloud folder. And your sister? She doesn't believe in deleting things. She tapped the paper once. I leaned forward. Darian took the sheets in both hands and read them slowly, eyes scanning every line as if each one chipped away at whatever illusion still stood. 6 months in, I'll have everything. The house, the account access, he won't even notice. Just need to play sweet until he puts my name on the deed. After that, it's mine. He exhaled through his nose, then flipped to the next page. She's easy to predict. His mom, too. If I say thank you and compliment her hair, she folds like paper. I'll have both of them wrapped by the time this wedding's over." No one spoke for several long seconds. Althea broke the silence. "She planned this like a business deal." Darian didn't look up. "I should have seen it." "No," I said softly. "You were meant not to." He looked over at me then, and I saw something flicker. Rage, hurt, disbelief, but also something steadier. Resolve. "I want this to end," he said. "Not tomorrow, tonight." Althea gave a sharp nod. "We'll keep it controlled, legal, strategic." I took a breath. "And honest, if we're doing this, there's no more acting." Althea turned to Darian. "You still want to do this here?" He nodded. "It ends here." We sat there in silence for a beat. It wasn't awkward. It was the sound of all three of us choosing clarity over comfort. Althea slid a card from her purse. "My attorney's already here as a guest. I'll have him draft the paperwork." Darian ran a hand through his hair, then looked up. "Let's make this clean." I leaned back, watching both of them, mother and son, suddenly united not by celebration, but by the need to reclaim control over their own lives. Outside the room, I could hear the muffled sounds of music rising again. Toasts being made, glasses clinking, the perfect illusion of a happy night rolling forward. But in here, the truth had taken root, and the wedding would go on, but not the way Trista planned it. The murmurs of the crowd drifted back like waves easing into the shore after a storm. We re-entered the main hall through a discreet service corridor, Althea leading with unmistakable poise, Darian beside her, silent but certain, and me just behind, heart steady for the first time that night. Our footsteps echoed softly against the marble floor, half muted by the music that wrapped around the room like fog. It was just after 8 o'clock. Candles flickered across satin-covered tables, and laughter curled through the air like smoke, rich with wine and false comfort. Guests leaned in close over dessert plates, sleeves rolled up slightly, as if the evening had settled into something relaxed and familiar. They believed naively that the most uncomfortable moments had passed. Trista stood at the front of the room beneath a soft wash of light, her face sculpted into a flawless smile, practiced, polished, campaign-ready. Her hand rested lightly on Darian's arm, not as a partner might hold, but like someone staking a claim. But Althea didn't walk toward the center table, the one adorned with roses and applause. She walked to the microphone. There was no announcement, no spotlight shift. Just her heels clicking against stone and a quiet ripple of attention that spread like chilled water across a too-warm room. Heads turned, casual conversations faded. The room tilted ever so slightly. Trista's smile held for precisely 3 seconds. Then she saw what Althea carried. Not a crystal flute, not a toast card. It was paper, stapled, creased, purposeful. Althea's voice rang out, low but clear, with the tone of someone who didn't need volume to be heard. "Before the next toast," she said, "I'd like to share something. Just a short passage from a message I was forwarded recently." Trista's fingers flexed at her sides. Her mask was still on, but cracked. A pause stretched, long enough for the room to hold its collective breath. Althea read, "6 months in, I'll have everything. The house, the accounts. He won't even see it coming. I just have to play sweet until the deed's in my name." No gasp, not yet, just silence. A slow, creeping silence that spread from table to table like ink in water. Trista stiffened. "That's taken completely out of context," she barked too fast. "You don't even understand what that was about." She laughed, a high, strained sound meant to sound casual. It didn't. I stepped forward without thinking, standing beside Althea. Not rehearsed, just right. "You told your friend Darian was a placeholder," I said, my voice steady. "A man with benefits until the paperwork was done." This time people turned. You could feel it, the collective mood shifting on its axis. Trista let out a brittle chuckle, eyes darting. "Oh, please. She's always been jealous of me. You've all seen it. This is just another sad attempt to hijack something that was never about her." She was unraveling, and fast. But it wasn't my words that broke her. It was Darian. He stepped away from her, silently, no outburst, no dramatic monologue. Just a man holding an engagement ring between his thumb and forefinger like something tainted. He stared at it for a breath, then walked to the table and placed it gently next to the folded napkins. Then he turned and walked away. Stillness followed. Not awkward, not tense, just Real. Trista stumbled toward Marjorie like a child caught lying. "Mom, say something, please." Marjorie clutched her purse tight, her knuckles white, her eyes uncertain. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Not for Trista, not for me. Randall shifted beside her, eyes fixed on the floor like the pattern of the carpet held secrets more comforting than what unfolded in front of him. Trista turned again, scanning the room for support. "This is a setup. You think this is real? I did everything right. I planned every moment, every flower, every song. I gave this night everything." "And that's the problem," Althea cut in, voice cold steel wrapped in silk. "You built a spectacle, not a relationship." Trista's voice cracked. "You're destroying my life." I looked at her, not with anger, just a truth long overdue. "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourself. We just stopped pretending not to see it." For a second, she stood frozen, lipstick smeared, mascara clinging to the corners of her lashes. The version of her she worked so hard to sculpt now distorted under the light of consequence. Then she screamed, not in pain, not in fear, the kind of scream people hear in dreams where everything falls apart and no one catches you. It ripped through the room, raw and unfiltered, a sound that echoed long after it stopped. But no one rushed to her side. The guests didn't flee. They didn't whisper. They watched. And so did I, as everything she built, brick by brick, collapsed under the truth she thought would stay buried. The air had changed, not the kind of change that follows a new song or a dropped glass, but something deeper, visceral. It slipped beneath skin and into bones, sending a low-level hum of awareness through every body in the room. Something had snapped, and even if people weren't ready to say it out loud, they felt it. You could see it in the way conversations halted mid-sentence, in how every pair of eyes slowly shifted toward the center of the room, like the spotlight knew exactly where to land. Trista stood there, alone beneath the soft golden glow that now felt more like interrogation than celebration. Her chest heaved. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for a lifeline. The smile she'd worn all evening, glossy and curated, had vanished, and what remained was something unrecognizable, panic layered over pride, fury masking humiliation. "This was supposed to be my moment," she yelled, voice cracking like glass under pressure. "My engagement! My future!" Her words didn't echo. They landed, heavy and desperate, falling into a silence thick with discomfort. Then she spun on Darian, rage and disbelief flashing across her face. "And you? How dare you let this happen? In front of everyone?" But Darian didn't meet her with matching fire. He didn't shout, didn't even flinch. His hand calmly dipped into the inside pocket of his suit jacket, and he pulled out a white envelope. Clean, uncreased, ready. Without saying a word, he walked to the nearest table, one still glittering with uneaten desserts and half-empty flutes of rosé, and placed the envelope next to the champagne tower. "I already signed it," he said. There it was. Just 4 words, spoken plainly but carrying the weight of finality. The room didn't gasp right away. It took a second, like people needed a moment to process what they'd just heard. Then a gasp. A clink of glass. Somewhere a child began to cry. Not because they understood, but because every adult in the room had suddenly gone quiet, and that kind of silence is terrifying in any language. Althea stepped beside Darian, resting a hand gently on his arm like the punctuation at the end of a sentence already spoken. "We're leaving," she said. Then, as if remembering something mildly inconvenient, she turned toward Trista and added, "You'll hear from our attorney in the morning." And just like that, they walked away, not hurriedly, not dramatically, with poise, with intent, with dignity. Behind them, chaos tried to find a foothold. Trista stood frozen. Then her hand flew up to her hair, smoothing strands as if reclaiming her reflection could somehow piece the night back together. Her gaze snapped to the crowd, eyes wide, pleading. "Mom!" she cried out, reaching into the air like a child drowning in a pool of strangers. Tell them I'm not the bad guy here. You always protected me. You always said I deserved the best." Marjorie didn't move. She stood clutching her champagne glass like it was an anchor. Her expression was hollow, confused perhaps, but also something closer to resignation, like a mirror that finally stopped pretending to be a window. Trista's voice broke again. "Mom, please, say something." The entire room waited. Then Marjorie spoke, softly, so soft it might have been mistaken for a sigh if not for the words that carried with it years of avoidance. "I protected what looked good on paper," she said. "I didn't protect what mattered." No explosion, no argument. Just the sharp sting of a truth no one had dared name until now. I stepped forward. Not because I needed to, not to gloat, just because it was time. Each heel tapped against the marble like punctuation. The crowd split in front of me, not with fear, but understanding. Some of them looked away, others stared, but none spoke. Trista faced me like a wounded animal, teeth bared behind trembling lips. "Are you proud of yourself?" she sneered. "Was this your plan? To ruin me? To take everything?" I didn't answer her. I turned to Marjorie. "You watched her silence me again and again," I said. My voice was level, controlled. "And you said nothing." Marjorie blinked back tears. Her shoulders sagged like the weight of decades had finally decided to settle where they belonged. "I didn't know how to stop her," she said. I shook my head. "No, you just didn't want to mess up the picture." That's when Trista lost it. "This is disgusting," she spat. "You're just bitter, that's all. Bitter because nobody wanted to hear your sad little story." I met her eyes one last time. "No, Trista, I'm not bitter. I'm just not invisible anymore." And I turned away. Not in triumph, not in rage, but in something else entirely, clarity. I walked past the display of framed family photos, the ones that never included me, the ones that always told half a truth with full conviction. I didn't stop to stare this time, because I didn't need to see my face in their version of the story. I had finally found my voice, and it didn't need to be framed to be heard. The crowd didn't erupt. They didn't applaud. They didn't even shift in their chairs. They simply watched, silent witnesses to a moment that didn't require spectacle, just truth. At the door, I paused, not out of hesitation, just a final glance. Marjorie stood with her hand over her mouth. Trista had sunk into a chair, mascara streaking down her cheeks, surrounded by no one. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their guilt. I just needed to leave, whole. A week later, I woke up to quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't scream of abandonment or emptiness, but of space. Space I had claimed, finally, for myself. The blinds in my San Diego apartment swayed gently with the morning breeze. Outside, the bay shimmered in the early light, a watercolor of pale gold and sea foam. The coffee maker gurgled behind me, filling the kitchen with its slow, familiar rhythm. No notifications blinked on my screen. No calendar reminders. No wedding talk. And no apologies waiting to be accepted. I wrapped my hands around the mug and leaned against the counter. My phone buzzed softly. 7th call this week. Marjorie. I let it go to voicemail. Some silences are empty, but this one, it was full. Full of choice. Full of peace. A new message popped up moments later, the preview line enough to sting and soothe all at once. "I know I was wrong. I'm trying to make it right. Dinner? Just you and me." I didn't open it. I didn't delete it either. Instead, I placed the phone face down and said aloud, quiet, just for me, "I needed you then. Now I need me." Later that morning, I walked the marina trail, one hand tucked in the pocket of my jacket, the other holding a paper bag with 2 croissants. I met Mona at our usual bench, the one with the view of sailboats and dog walkers, and the pier where we once danced on New Year's Eve with plastic flutes of sparkling apple cider. "Morning," she grinned. "You look taller." I laughed. "New shoes, new spine." We talked for a while. About nothing big. About how her upstairs neighbor started jazz guitar at 11 p.m., about a librarian Mona thinks might have a crush on her, about how I still haven't finished that novel I said I'd write 3 years ago. And then I pulled out a photo from my coat pocket. It was old, creased at the corners, color faded to soft browns and greens. One of the few from my childhood that had survived countless moves. Trista in the middle, smiling with all her teeth. Marjorie holding a glass of wine. My father blurry in the background. And me, half cut from the edge. Not because I wasn't there, but because no one made sure I was centered. Mona glanced at it, then at me. You keeping it? I nodded. But not on the fridge. I folded it once, neatly, and slid it into a small silver tin. The kind meant for keepsakes, not grudges. Then I closed the lid. I'm not erasing the past, I said. I'm just not letting it tell me who I am anymore. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. That evening, as the sun lowered itself into the Pacific like a coin dropping into a wishing well, I sat at my desk and booked a flight. One way to Maine. Coastal, quiet, unclaimed. Something I had always wanted, but never given myself permission to do. Until now. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Mona. Just circled the date on a paper calendar I bought last week from a bookstore that smelled like pine and second chances. Back in the mirror, my reflection caught me off guard. Not because I looked different, but because I didn't. Same face, same jawline, same uneven brows. But this time the woman looking back didn't ask if she belonged. She didn't beg to be seen. She was enough. They built a table I didn't belong at, so I built my own. And maybe that's the kind of freedom we don't need permission for. Some things in life don't end with a slam or a scream. Sometimes they end with a quiet walk out of the room and the decision to never walk back in. If you've ever felt like the forgotten one, the quiet one, the one who always made space for others but never claimed your own, maybe this story feels a little like yours. I used to think being left out meant I had to try harder to fit in. But sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't fighting for a seat. It's building your own table. And if you're standing at the edge of something painful right now, wondering if your silence is strength or surrender, ask yourself this. What would change if you started choosing yourself too? Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever walked away from a situation that didn't honor who you were? Or maybe you're still sitting at that hallway table wondering if you deserve more. Tell me in the comments, what part of this story hit closest to home for you? Drop a 1 if this story spoke to your heart. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every city, every name. And if it didn't quite hit the mark, that's okay too. Tell me why. Tell me what stories you want to hear next. If this video moved you, even just a little, please consider subscribing to this channel. That one click helps me keep telling stories that matter. Stories about us, about healing, about truth. I'm Laureen, and I want to thank you for listening. Because finally, I know my voice is not just mine anymore. It's one of many, growing louder, stronger, together.